Let's chat. Alright, so let's talk about South Africa. Our beautiful, complicated, wonderful home. You hear people talking, right? At the braai, in the taxi, you hear whispers. Things are tough. Hey, the price of bread, yo. And the big one, the country is broke. Now, broke is a strong word. It's not like the government is checking under the sofa cushions for spare change to buy a liter of milk, but it's close. It means the country is spending way more money than it's making, and it's borrowing a frightening amount just to keep the lights on. Sometimes literally. It's like having a job that pays you 10,000 rand a month, but your expenses are 15,000. For a while you can use your credit card, but eventually the bank calls. And right now, for South Africa, the bank is calling. Imagine you've got a family spaza shop. In the beginning it was doing great. Everyone came to buy their bread and milk from you. You were making enough money to pay the bills, fix the leaky roof, and maybe even save a little. But then, things started to go wrong. Some of the people you hired to run the shop started taking a little bit of money from the till. The fridge where you keep the Coke broke down, and you kept borrowing money to patch it up instead of buying a new one. Fewer customers are coming in because your prices are too high, but you have to keep them high to pay the interest on the money you borrowed. That, in a nutshell, is our country's economic situation. We're in a tight spot, a real pickle. The problem isn't just one thing, it's a whole bunch of things tangled together like a ball of Christmas lights in November. It's a story of big dreams after 1994, some questionable decisions along the way, and a few massive economy-sized potholes we've hit. We've got massive debt, an economy that's growing slower than a tortoise on a lazy Sunday, and state-owned companies that are, to put it politely, struggling. These aren't just headlines on the news. These issues affect why your data costs so much, why load shedding is a part of our vocabulary, and why finding a good job feels like searching for a unicorn. It's a heavy topic, I know, but we have to talk about it. So, stick with me. We're going to unpack this whole situation, piece by piece. We'll look at how we racked up this massive bill, why the economic engine is sputtering, and what happens when the big companies that are supposed to power the country, like Eskom, run out of steam themselves. We'll talk about corruption, not just as a scary word, but in terms of real rands and cents that could have built schools or hospitals. We'll break it down without the fancy jargon, using stories you can actually relate to. Because understanding the problem is the very first step to figuring out how we as South Africans can even begin to fix it. Let's get into it. Okay, so how did we get here? How did South Africa end up with a national credit card bill that gives the Minister of Finance sleepless nights? Think back to around 2008. The country's debt was actually quite low, around 24% of everything we produce in a year. That's what they call the debt to GDP ratio. It was like having a small manageable loan on a car. No big deal. But then things changed. The government started spending more, a lot more. It hired more people to work in government departments and gave them good salaries, which is nice. But it costs a fortune. The public sector wage bill ballooned, becoming one of the biggest expenses. It's like deciding to hire 5 new people for your spaza shop when you only have customers for 1. This spending spree went on for years. Every year, the government spent more than it earned in taxes. To cover the difference, it did what anyone with a spending problem does. It borrowed money. From local banks, from international investors, from anyone willing to lend. Fast forward to today, and that small car loan has turned into a massive mortgage on a mansion we can't afford. Our debt has shot up to over 75% of our GDP. Now here's the scary part. We have to pay interest on that debt. Right now, about 20 cents out of every single rand the government collects in taxes goes straight to paying just the interest. That's not even paying back the actual loan, just the interest. Imagine getting your salary at the end of the month, and before you can even buy groceries or pay for electricity, you have to give 1/5 of it to the bank just for the privilege of being in debt. That's our government's reality. The money we spend on debt interest is the same amount we spend on healthcare and policing combined. So every rand that goes to a banker in London or New York is a rand that can't be used to hire another nurse, build a new clinic, or pay for a police officer's patrol car. This is why the debt is such a massive problem. It's eating our budget alive, leaving less and less for the essential services that people desperately need. So, you might ask, why did we borrow so much? Well, it's a mix of things. Some of it was to try and build infrastructure and deliver services to people who never had them before, which is a noble goal, but a lot of it was also due to poor planning, overspending, and, as we'll see later, Some people helping themselves to money that wasn't theirs. The promises were big, but the wallet was small, and the credit card seemed like an easy solution. Now, the bill has come due, and the interest payments are relentless, trapping us in a cycle where we have to borrow more money just to pay the interest on the money we already owe. It's a deep, deep hole. Now let's talk about the economy itself, the engine that's supposed to generate all the money to pay for everything. For a country to feel like it's moving forward, its economy needs to grow faster than its population. Think about it. If you have a pizza and you cut it into 8 slices for 8 people, everyone gets a slice. But if 2 more people show up and you still only have the same 8-slice pizza, everyone's slice gets smaller. That's what's happening in South Africa. For the last 10 years, our economy has been growing at an average of less than 1% per year. Meanwhile, our population has been growing at about 1.4% per year. This means that, on average, each person's slice of the economic pie is getting smaller. We are getting poorer. This isn't just some abstract number on a chart. It has real-world consequences. Slow economic growth is the reason why it's so hard to find a job. When the economy is booming, companies are expanding, opening new factories, shops and offices. They need to hire more people. But when the economy is stagnant like ours, businesses get nervous. They stop expanding. They might even have to let people go just to survive. This is why our unemployment rate is shockingly high, especially for young people who are trying to get their first foot on the ladder. There simply aren't enough new jobs being created because the economic engine is stuck in first gear or even neutral. So why is our growth so slow? It's a perfect storm of problems. Firstly, we have the failures of our state-owned enterprises, which we'll get to in a bit. You can't run a factory if the power keeps going off, and you can't export your products if the trains and ports are broken. Secondly, there's a lack of confidence from investors. People with money, both here and overseas, are hesitant to invest in South Africa because they see the political instability, the policy uncertainty, and the corruption. They'd rather put their money somewhere safer and more predictable. It's like asking someone to invest in your spaza shop when the lights are always off and there are rumors that the cashier is stealing. They'll probably say, "No thanks." This slow growth trap is incredibly difficult to escape. To pay off our massive debt, we need the economy to grow. But the massive debt is one of the things holding the economy back because it scares investors and eats up money that could be used for growth-boosting projects. It's a classic catch-22. The government keeps forecasting that growth will pick up next year, but it rarely does. Just this year, the central bank had to lower its growth forecast for 2025 from a hopeful 1.7% to a more realistic 1.2%. We're not just moving slowly, we're barely moving at all, while the world around us is sprinting ahead. So you've got massive debt payments and an economy that's not growing. What does this mean for the government's budget? It means absolute chaos. It's like trying to plan a family budget for the month, but you know from day one that you're going to be short. The government faces this dilemma every single year. The National Treasury, the department in charge of the country's money, has the impossible job of trying to stretch a shrinking blanket to cover a growing bed. They have to decide what to cut: funding for universities, social grants, money for fixing roads. Every choice is a painful one. One of the biggest headaches is the public sector wage bill. For years, government employees received salary increases that were higher than inflation, meaning their pay was growing faster than the cost of living. While great for them, this put a massive strain on the national budget. It's a politically sensitive issue. If you try to freeze wages, you face massive strikes from powerful unions, which can shut the country down. But if you keep paying the high salaries, you have less money for everything else. This has created a situation where a huge chunk of our national budget goes to paying salaries, not to delivering the actual services those people are supposed to provide. To try and solve the money shortage, the government has looked at raising taxes. It seems like a simple solution, right? If you need more money, just charge people more. The Treasury recently tried to do this. They proposed raising the value-added tax, or VAT. That's the tax you pay on almost everything you buy, from 15% to 17%. But this idea went down like a lead balloon. People were furious. They argued that the poor would be hit the hardest, as they spend most of their income on basic goods. It also felt unfair. People asked, why should we pay more tax when the government wastes so much of the money it already has? the proposal was rejected, leaving the government back at square one. This budget deadlock is a massive problem. It shows that the government is running out of options. It can't easily cut spending because of political pressure, and it can't easily raise taxes because the public has lost trust. The result is a kind of paralysis. Important decisions get delayed, and the country's financial situation just gets worse. It's a sign of a government that has lost the confidence of its people. You can't keep asking for more money from the household pot if everyone knows you're the one who keeps leaving the back door open for thieves to come in and help themselves. Now let's talk about the two elephants in the room that are sitting on our economy and honestly crushing it: Eskom and Transnet. These are what we call state-owned enterprises, or SOEs. They're massive companies owned by the government, supposed to provide us with essential services. Eskom gives us electricity, and Transnet runs our railways and ports. In a healthy country, these companies would be the backbone of the economy. But here in South Africa, they've become our Achilles heel. They're like the two big brothers who were supposed to protect the family but instead ended up burning the house down. Let's start with Eskom. Eskom. The reason we all have candles, power banks, and a deep understanding of what stage 4 means. For years, Eskom has been plagued by mismanagement, corruption, and a failure to build new power stations while the old ones just crumbled away. The result? Load shedding. These planned power cuts are not just an inconvenience, they're an economic disaster. Imagine trying to run a small business, a hair salon, a welder's workshop, a restaurant, when the power can go off for hours at a time. You simply can't. Production stops, customers leave, and money is lost. It's estimated that load shedding costs our economy billions of rands every single day. And to add insult to injury, Eskom keeps hiking its prices, making electricity more expensive even though it's less reliable. Then you have Transnet, Eskom's equally troubled sibling. Transnet is in charge of the veins and arteries of our economy, the railway lines that transport minerals and goods from mines and farms to the ports, and the ports themselves where these goods are shipped overseas. But our railways are a mess. The lines are old, there's widespread cable theft, and there just aren't enough working locomotives. This means mining companies can't get their coal or iron ore to the ports efficiently. Farmers can't get their fruit to the ships on time, so they have to use expensive trucks instead, which clogs up our roads and increases costs. Our ports are also notoriously inefficient, with ships having to wait for days to load or unload. The failure of these two giants has a devastating domino effect. Because of Eskom's failures, a massive steel company like ArcelorMittal announced it was closing a plant, citing unstable energy and poor rail services as key reasons. That's thousands of jobs gone, just like that. When you can't guarantee power and you can't guarantee that businesses can move their goods, you simply can't have a functioning modern economy. It's that simple. These companies were supposed to be assets driving growth and development. Instead, they've become massive liabilities, draining money from the state through endless bailouts and, honestly, actively strangling the private sector businesses that we need to create jobs. We can't have an honest conversation about why South Africa is broke without talking about the big ugly elephant in the room: corruption. Now, this isn't just about a few bad apples or some dodgy tenders here and there. We're talking about a systemic problem where for years, vast amounts of public money meant for the people were siphoned off by connected individuals. You know, this is the part of the story where the people hired to manage the spaza shop didn't just steal a few sweets from the jar. They backed a truck up to the front door at night and emptied the whole storeroom. This era, often called state capture, has had a devastating and lasting impact on our country's finances and, honestly, its soul. Think about it in simple terms. Every rand stolen from a government project is a rand that can't be used to build a house, buy a textbook, or provide medicine to a clinic. When you hear stories of multi-billion rand contracts for things that were never delivered, or prices being inflated to 10 times their actual cost, that is your money being stolen. It's the tax you paid on your loaf of bread. It's the VAT from your airtime purchase. This money was supposed to build a better South Africa for everyone, but instead, it went into the pockets of a powerful few, funding lavish lifestyles while millions of people remained stuck in poverty. The corruption wasn't just about stealing money directly, it was also about destroying institutions. To pull off this level of theft, you have to weaken the organizations that are supposed to stop you. The Hawks, the National Prosecuting Authority. These crime-fighting bodies were hollowed out, with good people being pushed aside and replaced by individuals who would look the other way. This is why, for a long time, you saw very few high-profile people going to jail for corruption. It created a culture of impunity, a belief that you could steal from the state and get away with it. This has shattered public trust. People are tired of hearing about commissions of inquiry and endless investigations that lead nowhere. This culture of corruption is also what crippled companies like Eskom and Transnet. They became feeding troughs for the politically connected. Contracts were not given to the best company for the job, but to the company that would give the biggest kickback. Inexperienced people were appointed to powerful positions based on who they knew, not what they knew. This is how you end up with brand new power stations that don't work properly, and contracts for the wrong size trains. The rot of corruption didn't just cost us money, it cost us competence, efficiency, and our ability to deliver the most basic services. It's a cancer that we are still fighting to cut out. So we've talked about debt, slow growth, and corruption. But what does this all mean for the average person? For your family, your neighbors, and your Gogo waiting for her pension? This is where the economic numbers on a spreadsheet turn into the harsh realities of daily life in South Africa. The most direct impact is on jobs. With an official unemployment rate of over 32% and much higher for young people, millions of South Africans are desperate for work. This isn't because people are lazy, it's because the economy, choked by all the problems we've discussed, simply isn't creating enough jobs. This leads to poverty, hopelessness, and a loss of dignity for so many. Then there's the rising cost of living. When the economy is weak and the government is broke, everything gets more expensive. You feel it every time you go to the shops. The price of cooking oil, maize meal, and transport keeps going up. But salaries, if you're lucky enough to have one, don't keep pace. The government, desperate for cash, also increases taxes on things like fuel, which makes it more expensive for taxis to run, and they have to pass that cost on to you. So you end up paying more to get to a job that isn't paying you anymore. It's a daily squeeze that leaves millions of families struggling to make ends meet by the middle of the month. The failure of basic services is another daily struggle. It's not just load shedding. It's about potholes that turn your street into an obstacle course, taps that run dry for days on end, and under-resourced police stations that can't respond when you need them. It's about crowded clinics where you have to wait all day to see a doctor, and schools that don't have enough textbooks for all the learners. This is the direct result of a state that has been hollowed out by mismanagement and corruption. The money that was supposed to maintain our infrastructure and pay for these services has been wasted or stolen, and now we are all living with the consequences. All of this creates a society that is deeply unequal and on edge. The gap between the rich and the poor in South Africa is one of the widest in the world. A small minority live lives of incredible luxury, while the majority struggle daily. This breeds frustration, anger, and social unrest. You see it in the protests that happen almost every day across the country, where communities block roads because they feel they have no other way to make their voices heard. They are protesting the lack of water, the terrible roads, the lack of jobs. They are protesting the broken promises. This economic struggle isn't just about finance. It's about the very fabric of our society being stretched to its breaking point. Let's circle back to taxes for a moment, because it's a really important piece of this puzzle. When a government is broke, its first instinct is often to look at its citizens and say, "We need more money from you." In theory, this makes sense. Taxes are how a country pays for public services, but in South Africa it's become a huge point of contention. The government's recent attempts to raise VAT is a perfect example of this. The idea was to bring in more money to plug the hole in the budget. But the public reaction was swift and angry. Why? Because you can't squeeze water from a stone. The problem is twofold. First, South Africans already feel heavily taxed. We have a progressive income tax system, which means the more you earn, the higher percentage you pay. We also have VAT on most goods, fuel levies, and other taxes. There's a small base of taxpayers, individuals and companies, who carry a very heavy burden. Many people feel they've reached their limit. They see their pay slips getting smaller due to tax, while the cost of everything around them is going up. Asking them to pay even more, especially for a government they don't trust, feels like a slap in the face. It feels like being punished for the government's mistakes. This brings us to the second and perhaps bigger problem: trust. The social contract between a government and its citizens is simple. We pay our taxes, and you use that money wisely to provide services and build a better country. But that contract has been broken. People have seen billions, if not trillions, of rands lost to corruption and wasteful expenditure. They've read the headlines about state capture. They experience the failing services every day. So when the government comes asking for more tax money, the natural response is, for what? So you can waste that too. It's a completely understandable reaction. This lack of trust makes it almost impossible for the government to solve its budget crisis through tax hikes. Any attempt to do so is met with massive public resistance and protests, as we saw with the VAT proposal. It also pushes people to find ways to avoid paying tax, which only makes the problem worse. This is the corner we've been backed into. The government desperately needs more revenue, but it has lost the moral authority to ask for it. It's like a family member who keeps borrowing money from you and promising to pay it back, but you know they're just going to waste it on gambling. After a while, you have to say no, not because you don't want to help, but because you know it won't solve the underlying problem. Alright, after all that doom and gloom, you're probably thinking, okay Trevor, we're in a real mess. Is there any way out of this? And the answer is yes. It's not easy and it's not quick, but there is a path forward. South Africa is a country of incredibly resilient, innovative and resourceful people. We've overcome impossible odds before and we can do it again. But it requires honest leadership, tough decisions, and for all of us to play our part. The first and most important step is to fix the government and get serious about fighting corruption. This is non-negotiable. We need to see people who stole public money being held accountable, and that means arrests, prosecutions, and jail time. Secondly, we need to get our economy growing again. This means creating an environment where businesses, both big and small, want to invest and create jobs. How do we do that? By providing policy certainty. Businesses need to know what the rules are and that they won't suddenly change. We must fix the basics, keep the lights on, and get the trains running. Sorting out Eskom and Transnet is not an option. It's an absolute emergency. This might mean bringing in private sector expertise and investment to help run these critical entities more efficiently. We need to cut the red tape that makes it so difficult to start and run a business in South Africa. We have to make this a place where people want to build things again. Third, the government has to get its own house in order. It needs to live within its means. This means taking a hard look at the public sector wage bill and making sure it's sustainable. It means cutting wasteful expenditure, no more lavish parties, unnecessary overseas trips, or overpriced contracts. Every rand has to be treated as sacred because it is. It's the hard-earned money of the South African people. The government needs to rebuild trust by being transparent and showing people that their tax money is being used wisely to deliver services that actually work. When people see their money making a difference in their communities, they will be more willing to contribute. Finally, this is not just a job for the government. All of us have a role to play. We need to hold our leaders accountable at the ballot box and beyond. We need to support local businesses and entrepreneurs who are creating jobs in our communities. We need to foster a culture that rejects corruption at all levels, not just in government, but in our daily lives. The road ahead is long and will require patience and sacrifice. But our country's potential is immense. We have the people, we have the resources, and we have the spirit. We just need to get the fundamentals right. It's time to stop talking and start building. I believe we can.